What's up, y'all? Toya here, and I am back with another video for y'all. Before we get into the video, make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe, and share. Alright, y'all. We gotta have a conversation because, man, my last delivered video, I got a ton of comments. I honestly got way more comments than I anticipated. And yeah, so if you guys haven't seen that video, make sure you check it out so you know what I'm talking about. Now, after reading all those comments, I kind of had an idea, and I was like, you know what? How much should gig workers actually be paid? Right? How much should we actually be paid to work, right? And before I go ahead and dive in and, dissect everything from the comment section, let's go ahead and start from the very beginning, okay? And that's, why do people do gig work? So for myself, I got into gig work simply because it was easy, quick money that I could make when I needed it. I decided to lean on it when I was in a pinch because, well, I wasn't making enough with my regular job. So decided to pick up gig work because it allowed me to be flexible. I could work when I want to. And like I said, it was quick, easy money, right? And I would say that's pretty much the same for most people who get into gig work. Like I said, you can be in a pinch and you need some money. Maybe you got a vacation coming up and you're like, hey, I can go ahead and make a few extra $100 so I can have it in my pocket, whatever. And you have those who opt to do it full time because they don't want to report to anybody. They want to have that flexibility of making their own schedule and working as much or as little as they want, right? But yeah, those are pretty much the most common reasons most people get into gig work, okay? Now, when I first started doing gig work, I was very naive, okay? I don't know what type of expectations that I had, but I definitely learned to lower them pretty quickly. So, like I said, got into gig work, didn't really know what I was doing. My first taste of gig work was actually DoorDash, right? And I did that for a few months, and like I said, I learned pretty quickly how to go ahead and start navigating the app so I can be the most profitable. And over time, even to this day, I've learned which apps work better for me in my area, what are the best orders, what orders work best for me as far as the pay to mileage ratio, and all of that, right? So with that being said, going into this delivered order that I recently did, I had that same criteria, right? I always aim for the best pay to mileage ratio, okay? And the payout for this order was reasonable to me compared to the amount of mileage I had to drive, right? But the problem was for me, which a lot of people chimed in on, was the fact that the amount of food that I got was a bit more than I had expected, okay? And yes, I know it is a catering order. Catering orders are a lot of food, okay? But I was only mentioning it because I had picked up from the same restaurant before, and it was about $50 less, and the food amount was about half of the size of this order, and I actually received more pay. And yes, I know payouts and all of that can vary, but it was just something I wanted to point out, okay? And so I did the setup and everything, and I was just commenting how I felt that medical facilities are fairly cheap in their tip. They either tip very little or they don't tip at all, right? And I more or less was making the comment that, if they would have tipped, the order would have been more worth it in the sense of the size of the order, right? The payout was still good for the mileage ratio. It was still a good order. I'm not saying that it was a bad order in any shape or form, right? But if they would have tipped, it would have been a bit more worth it because of the amount of food that I had to deal with, okay? And like I said, a lot of people were commenting on this, okay? They were agreeing. They were saying, yeah, that was a lot of food. You should have got paid more. And some people were saying, tipping is optional. If you're gonna have a problem with it, you should have never taken the order. You saw how much it was gonna be. A lot of different stuff, right? And I just want to take a few points from the comment section and just kind of go over it and, like I said, tie it together with my whole thought as far as figuring out how much gig workers should actually be paid. Okay, now this one particular comment, it was a lot. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm just going to pull out a snippet, okay? It is becoming more apparent a lot of gig workers seem to not fully understand their legal standing. I heard many use the words unfair, cheap, low pay, but gig workers are independent contractors. Normally, pay is a flat rate. This is not a wage nor a salary. And yes, you are 100% correct. We aren't expecting to make crazy money on these apps. The reason you hear that terminology, low pay, unfair, welfare, all of that is simply because we feel like we're being taken advantage of by these companies. They're not paying us enough to deal with all of the stuff that comes with gig work, right? Like, for instance, the expenses. We have to put a lot of money back into our car at the end of the day. So that's why you have people who do this no tip, no trip. If they have to drive 10 miles for $2 or $3, you're more or less doing that order for free. And yeah, there are going to be some people that end up taking that order because they don't know any better. Like myself, when I first started doing gig work, I was taking pretty much everything that came to me. But like I said, over time, I learned that, whoa, okay, I only made like $30 within, 2 or 3 hours. And I had to put 15 back into my car, after all my driving that I did, right? And then it's like, okay, clearly that wasn't worth it. Okay. Now, yeah, you can go ahead and be particular with your orders. You can cherry pick all day long. But at the end of the day, the company's still going to go ahead and try to do whatever they need to do to boost their profits. And a lot of times that's at the expense of the drivers, right? So the only thing we're really asking for is to just be compensated for the work that we're doing. Okay. And I'll dive into that breakdown and everything later on. Okay. Just bear with me. Be patient. Okay. But I kind of want to go off topic a little bit. It still ties together into everything, but I still want to go ahead and mention this thing. Okay. So the times that we live in, they're crazy right now. The cost of everything is out of control, okay? And just by observation, I found that a lot of the older generation, they seem to have this idea of those in their 30s or younger. They're, lazy. They don't want to work. They're looking for a handout. They're complaining about everything, all of that stuff, right? The thing that they fail to realize is back when they were our age or younger, the cost of living was reasonable. It wasn't uncommon that one person's salary was able to take care of a majority of the bills, right? One income was able to take care of the mortgage, a car, maybe two, take care of the spouse, the kids, and they would still have money left over to put into savings and investments and retirement and all that stuff, right? And no, I know this wasn't for everyone, okay? It's a lot of different factors depending on your job and, a lot of different things. But it wasn't uncommon that this was happening, if you want to compare it back then to now, right? And this was just due to the reason that the cost of living and your income, it was pretty much on par with each other, right? And for the most part, we kind of stayed at a point where everything was even. So, cost of living and your income, they were pretty much neck and neck. Cost of living might go up a little bit and, this will come up a little bit. But all of a sudden, you went from this and then cost of living just skyrocketed, right? And then your wages were like, maybe up a little bit. And this is why today, you see both parties working, both parties in the household working. Sometimes they might have to get a part-time job. Maybe they have to do gig work and they're still just getting by. And no, you cannot use the argument of, maybe they're living above their means, or maybe they should stop spending money on, extra, whatever. You cannot deny the data. Statistically speaking, the cost of living is way higher in comparison to your wages. And like I said, just comparing that to how it was, maybe 50, 60 years ago, however long ago you want to compare. So we've gotten to the point, especially more recently, you have a lot of people who are finally speaking up and saying like, hey, it's unfair that we have to work this hard and we're really getting less. Like, in all seriousness, you have people working just as hard, if not even harder, and they're technically getting less because the cost of living is so high, right? And so I know some people will say, well, gig work is, it's not supposed to be sustainable. You're not supposed to work off of it full time. But, we've started to evolve into a society where it's not uncommon that you can go ahead and do side work and make a living off of it. You can really make a living off of anything. It doesn't matter what it is or how minuscule you think it is. If you want to make a living off of it, you can make a living off of it. You just got to be smart about it, right? And, like I said, I know it's gig work in comparison to, a full-time job, but it's the same argument. We're both just saying, hey, we just want to get paid for the work that we're doing. And like I said, it doesn't matter how minuscule it might seem. A job is a job, right? And if you're taking the time out of your day to complete a job, you deserve to be compensated fairly, right? And keep in mind, the point of channels like mine and other gig tubers, the point is to educate folks, right? To educate those who might be interested interested in gig work, and to educate those who may not necessarily be interested in doing gig work, but they're just interested in seeing how the community operates, right? And other than the situation with pay, another thing that frustrates me is the fact that, like I said, we're trying to educate people and tell people like, hey, this is how it is. And yet you have people who just look at it like, oh, well, that's too bad. You know, tipping is optional. So, you know, if you're relying on your tips, you know, maybe you should go ahead and get another job, right? And it's like the same argument when people are doing the same thing with waiters and waitresses, right? Knowing that the restaurant takes advantage of them and they have to live off tips, but people refuse to tip because they're like, oh, well, you know, it's not my job to tip. If you have a problem with it, go ahead and take it up with your boss. You know, you don't like it, go get another job. Same exact argument, right? And people got to keep in mind, it's like some people might do certain jobs because they have no other choice, right? For whatever reason, if it's medical reasons, you know, maybe they got a record, you know, whatever the case may be, you know, you have to realize that there might not be another option for that individual, right? And all you got to do is just treat that person with respect, okay? You know, you may or may not necessarily agree with, you know, tip culture, because honestly, I'm not in agreement with it as well. But the reason I do tip is because I know that these companies take advantage of people, and I don't mind giving a few extra dollars to, you know, kind of make it a little bit more worth it for them. You know, if I'm able to go ahead and pay for that service, you know, whether it's food delivery or, you know, I'm going out to eat or, you know, whatever the case may be, whatever service, I don't mind giving a tip. And that's always going to be my motto. You can agree or disagree. You know, if people, we just got to have more human decency, okay? And not to wish bad on anybody, you know, that person could be you. Literally, if somebody told me 2 or 3 years ago that I would be doing gig work, hell, even a month before I decided to dive into Amazon Flex, if somebody would have told me I would have been doing gig work, I would have been like, why would I do gig work? I'm cool at my job. You know, it could be better, but I'm straight, you know? And look at me now. I'm here doing gig work and trying to educate other folks on gig work, right? You know, humble yourself, because you never know. You might be in their shoes and you might be the one that's asking for a tip or asking to be compensated fairly for the job that you're doing, all right? Keep that in mind. Like I said, not to wish bad on anybody, but it's just something that you have to put into perspective. But with all that being said, the issue with pay, unfortunately, is not just gig work. It's also just pay in general for our W-2 jobs as well, right? And unfortunately, until we get that straightened out, we're probably not gonna see any type of change in the gig scene, because, you know, like I said, a lot of people already see gig work as low paying and low skill already, right? But I kind of have some ideas as far as like how we can actually come up with a plan to pay gig workers more fairly, okay? And I can kind of put it together in like a tier system, right? Say for instance, you put food delivery at the bottom, okay? And after that, maybe catering, and then after that, probably package delivery, and then at the top, you could probably do like the cargo van and box truck deliveries, right? You know, maybe we can do $1 per mile for food delivery, and maybe if that's too much, maybe we can do 75 cents or 50 cents a mile. You know, that way it's a little bit more worth it compared to just doing something like 10 miles for $2 or $3, right? You know, maybe for catering. Now, I know some people may not necessarily agree with giving a tip that's 10% of the total food amount, but you know, that could be standard. Or maybe you can do it by the quantity, like how much food they actually have to deliver, because they do that with those bigger orders. And I know like these are orders for like pallets and stuff. Like for them, you get paid by the weight. And you can also get paid additional if you have to unload sometimes, depending on the app, right? So if you take it to a spot and they don't have anybody to go ahead and unload that truck for you, you get paid to unload it, right? Obviously, it's more merchandise, you know, it's a lot of lifting, a lot of heavy lifting. But even then, you know, you're still technically doing more work, because now that's an extra step you have to do, right? And really quick, because I forgot to bring this up earlier, in the comment section, a lot of people were mentioning hourly rate, right? I don't like to categorize gig work at an hourly rate unless I'm doing multiple hours of gig work, okay? This one particular comment, they were saying what I was asking for as far as pay, they were trying to compare it and say it was more or less kind of like a doctor's salary, you know, 120 something dollars an hour. I made $30 in 30 minutes. That doesn't mean I made $60 an hour, because I made $30 and that's it. That was the only job that I did for that day. So I don't like to do an hourly rate unless I'm doing multiple hours of work. So like for instance, if I'm doing Amazon Flex, say I do 3 hours of deliveries and, you know, I want to do an average to see how much I made at an hourly rate, I can do an hourly rate there. But I don't like to use hourly as a way to measure gig work pay, like I said, unless I'm doing multiple hours of work. Because depending on what you do, you might do 1 or 2 deliveries a day and that's it. So that's not really oh, I made this much an hour, because, well, you only did like an hour of work technically, or whatever, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But I don't like to use that measurement when it comes to pay. Also forgot to mention that it's not uncommon that you can make $100+ on a single gig within an hour. Obviously these are going to be those larger orders in most cases, but that doesn't equate to a doctor's salary, because these are usually going to be those one and done type of gigs. You're not going to be making $100+ an hour throughout the entire day. Like I said, it's a one and done, you get paid and you're done for the day. So yeah, that's it. But regardless, just to sum all of this up, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it does fall back on these companies to stop being greedy and to compensate at least a reasonable amount, right? You know, we're not asking to get paid a crazy amount. You know, we just want to make sure we have enough to put back into our car and to say that, you know, the delivery is kind of worth it, right? And for those folks who may be against that, you know, like I mentioned before, I don't know what to tell you. Half of the stuff that I say might go in one ear and out the other. But the most you can do, like, have a little bit of human decency, have some respect for your fellow man, and just respect the other person's journey. If they decide they want to do delivery gig work, let them do delivery gig work. If they decide they want to do a full-time job, they can do a full-time job, right? I do both. So there's nothing wrong with either. Like I said, whatever journey you decide to go on, that's on you. Okay, the most that you can do is just respect them. Okay, like I said, at the end of the day, we're just all trying to get through life, and you know, we're just doing it the best way we knew how. Okay, that's really it, y'all. But I would love to know you guys' thoughts. What do you guys think would be the best way to make sure gig workers are compensated fairly? Let me know in the comments. But I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna catch you guys on the next one, and as always, stay safe out there and keep grinding.